Welcome to the Deep Dive, listeners. Wow, you guys really sent in some amazing stuff for us to dive into this time. I mean, we've got academic papers,
Yeah.
podcasts, YouTube videos, even a couple of documentaries.
Sure.
And you know what it's all about? It's
Yeah.
all about food. But
Hmm.
we're not just talking about, what's for dinner tonight. We're talking about the whole system.
Right.
Like,
Mm.
how does our food get from the farm to our plates? Who's really controlling that whole journey? And then what does it all mean for our health at the end of the day?
Yeah, it really is kind of a fascinating web, isn't it? And it seems
Hmm.
like you've given us all the threads to really untangle it this time.
That's the plan. Okay, so let's start with one of those threads. I've got this excerpt here.
Yeah.
It's from an academic paper, and it talks about hybrid institutions in the food supply chain.
Okay.
It kind of makes it sound like the grocery store or some ancient temple, right?
Oh, well, maybe not a temple. But
Yeah.
the point they're making in this paper is that food supply chains are way more complex than just a series of transactions.
Right.
Think about it this way. Even that simple head of lettuce that you pick up at the store, that's the result of farmers, distributors, packaging companies, retailers, and then all sorts of regulatory bodies, all working together,
Oh, wow.
sometimes even sharing resources to get that lettuce to you.
So it's like a network then, not
Mhm.
just a straight line from point A to point B.
Exactly, exactly. And that actually has some pretty interesting consequences for you, the consumer.
Okay.
For example, just think about the rise of local produce sections in supermarkets.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That shift, that's a reflection of changes in the supply chain,
Yeah.
potentially driven by consumer demand for fresher, more sustainably sourced food,
Hmm.
but also by farmers, finding new ways to reach their customers directly.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, who doesn't love supporting local farms and getting that tastier produce?
Absolutely.
But this paper also mentions something called captive governance,
Yeah.
which, I don't know, that sounds a little ominous.
Yeah.
What does that even mean in the context of, like, our food?
So what it means is that sometimes within these really complex systems, smaller producers,
Yeah.
like individual farmers or, small food businesses, they can end up with very little bargaining power.
Oh,
They
oh.
become really reliant on the terms that are dictated by larger corporations further up the chain.
So even if, like, I want to go and support those local farms, the system itself might be making it harder for them to even, like, thrive and survive.
That's the concern. And it's not just about, those individual choices. The structure of the system itself can create these vulnerabilities.
Right.
And, this can lead to less diversity in the types of food that are even available to us.
Oh, wow.
Potential price hikes, even shortages in certain areas.
That's crazy to think about. And this actually kind of ties into something else that you sent in that really caught my eye. It was this statistic from the Texas Slim podcast. And it said 88% of Americans are, quote unquote, metabolically bankrupt,
Hmm.
which, I mean, it sounds scary, almost like we're all on the verge of financial ruin, but with our health instead of our wallets.
Yeah, it's a startling figure for sure. And it points to a much deeper issue, the disconnect between, our modern food environment and then our metabolic health.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually where all those YouTube videos that you sent in about obesity, diabetes, and heart disease,
Like,
they all highlight how our food choices are directly linked to these chronic conditions that are plaguing so many people.
and before we go any further, I just want to say, you know, this is not about blaming individuals.
Oh, absolutely.
We all make the best choices that we can with the information that we have
Yeah.
and with the options that are available to us.
Totally.
What we're trying to do here is understand how this system that we've been talking about is influencing those choices.
Yeah,
Sometimes in ways that we don't even realize.
absolutely. Yeah. It's about recognizing that our individual decisions are made within a larger context, a larger system.
Okay, so let's talk about that context. There's this one YouTube video. It's called Explained, the Obesity Industrial Complex.
Yeah.
And it really breaks it down. It argues that it's not just our willpower that's failing. There's like a whole system designed to keep us hooked on these unhealthy foods.
Yeah, and it's a system with a lot of players,
Right.
from food manufacturers to pharmaceutical companies, even the media.
Right. It's like this web of influence that goes way beyond just what's on the grocery store shelves.
Absolutely.
And this actually brings to mind another YouTube video, the one with Dr. Anthony Balduzzi, where he lists like the 10 worst foods for our health.
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about that list.
That's a great illustration
It is.
of how readily available, affordable, and heavily marketed many of these unhealthy foods are.
Totally.
It's not a coincidence that they're often the most convenient and appealing options, especially, for people with busy lives and limited budgets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of appealing, there's this other YouTube video that it compares big food to big tobacco.
Right.
It basically argues that they use similar tactics to downplay health risks
Right.
and keep us coming back for more. That one's called The Lie That Made Food Conglomerates Rich.
Oh, yeah. It's pretty eye-opening look at how marketing strategies and even scientific research can be manipulated to serve, corporate interests,
Right.
often at the expense of public health.
And they highlight like several different tactics, right? Like casting doubt on the science,
Right.
controlling the narrative, even engineering food to be straight up addictive.
Yeah, and it's not just like some conspiracy theory. They back it up with examples.
Yeah.
Like, that buried study on nitrites and cancer from the corrupt food industry documentary.
Oh, yeah.
That documentary raises some serious questions about the role of industry influence and, scientific research, particularly when it comes to those long-term health effects of certain food additives.
That's scary to think about. And then there's that shocking revelation from the junk food, sugar, and additives documentary about, food executives deciding not to address the obesity epidemic
Yeah.
because it would hurt their profits.
Talk about putting profits before people. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it's scary to think about how much power these corporations have to really shape our food environment.
And it's not just about like what they're putting in the food, but also like this tactic of engineering addictive foods is really disturbing.
It is.
The Lie That Made Food Conglomerates Rich video explains how they use salt to mask what they call off notes in processed food
Yeah.
and create like this hyper palatable concoction that our brains just can't resist.
Yeah, it's fascinating,
It is. It's really interesting.
albeit unsettling. It's a look at how our biology can be exploited for profit.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the need for greater transparency and regulation in the food industry.
So what can we even do about this? I mean, is it even possible to like fight back against this obesity industrial complex and kind of reclaim our food system? I think it starts with awareness.
Oh.
The more that we understand about the forces that are at play, the more empowered we are to make, informed choices. And the good news is there are people and movements out there that are really pushing for change.
Oh, that's good to hear. Like what kind of things?
Well, like, the beef initiative that was featured in the Texas Slim podcast that connects consumers directly with, ranchers who prioritize sustainable and ethical practices.
Right.
And, the rise of farmers markets,
Oh, yeah.
giving us more access to fresh local produce.
And then there's chefs like Alice Waters, who's featured in the How Corporations Are Ruining Your Health documentary.
Mhm.
And they're, advocating for a return to whole seasonal ingredients and just a more mindful approach to cooking and eating in general.
Exactly. Those are great examples of, those grassroots efforts to create a more transparent and equitable food system.
It really all comes back to us, the consumers, and like voting with our dollars, right?
Yeah.
By supporting these initiatives. Choosing healthier options.
Right.
Cooking more meals at home.
Those individual choices absolutely matter.
Yeah.
But, systemic change is also needed.
Mm.
Things like, stricter labeling laws, restrictions on marketing unhealthy foods to children,
Right.
and, realigning government subsidies to support sustainable agriculture.
Yeah, it's like all these different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground already, from the intricate web of the food supply chain to the alarming statistics about our metabolic health, and then these manipulative tactics of the food industry. But we're just getting started. In part 2 of this deep dive, we'll delve even deeper into the impact of this system on our well-being and explore what it actually means to be metabolically bankrupt. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive, into the world of food systems and health.
It's amazing how much we uncovered just in part 1 about the hidden influences that are shaping what we end up eating, what ends up on our plates. It's almost like there's this invisible hand kind of guiding our food choices,
Yeah, that's a powerful analogy, and it really highlights how these complex systems operate kind of beyond our immediate awareness.
Right, right. And speaking of things that operate beneath the surface, we talked about that alarming statistic, remember?
Yeah.
88% of Americans being metabolically bankrupt.
Right.
But what does that actually mean for our day-to-day lives? It's not like we're walking around with like empty wallets, right?
Right. It's not a financial bankruptcy,
Right.
but it's a biological one.
Yeah.
Essentially, what it means is our bodies are struggling to manage energy efficiently.
Okay.
Think of it like a car engine that's, constantly sputtering, unable to burn fuel properly.
So it's not just about being overweight then, but about how our cells are actually functioning.
Exactly, exactly. You can actually be within a normal weight range and still be metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's about what's happening at the cellular level, how your body processes glucose, stores fat, manages inflammation.
And based on, all this source material that you provided, it seems like the modern food environment is a major culprit in driving this metabolic dysfunction.
Ugh. That's a key takeaway from a lot of these sources, including the YouTube video, how ultra-processed food is slowly killing us.
Right.
That documentary makes a really strong case for how the overabundance of these foods that are loaded with, refined sugars, unhealthy fats, and artificial additive,
Right.
it's pushing our metabolisms to the brink.
It's like our bodies weren't designed to handle this kind of,
Mm.
I don't know, nutritional onslaught, I guess you could say.
That's a great way to put it. Our ancestors evolved eating whole, unprocessed foods, and our bodies just haven't had time to adapt to these drastic changes in our food supply over the past, few decades.
And it's not just the ingredients themselves, right?
Yeah.
There's something about how these foods are processed that makes them even more problematic for our health.
You're picking up on a crucial point there.
Right.
The refining process actually strips away a lot of the natural fiber, the vitamins, the minerals,
Mm.
leaving behind this concentrated dose of calories and, often unhealthy compounds.
Mm.
It's like comparing a freshly squeezed orange juice to a sugary orange drink.
Oh, yeah.
They might both taste sweet, but the nutritional value is vastly different.
Yeah, totally. And then they pump those processed foods full of, like, artificial flavors and colors and preservatives
Right.
to make up for, like, the lost taste and texture and to, make them last longer on the shelf.
All of which benefits, the food industry's bottom line, but not necessarily our health.
Of course not, right?
And speaking of things that benefit our health, let's talk about fiber.
Okay.
Remember that YouTube video explained the obesity industrial complex?
Yeah.
It made a really strong case for how important fiber is for our gut health and regulating our blood sugar levels.
And how it's been systematically removed from so many of our, like, staple foods.
Precisely.
That's great.
Fiber helps slow down digestion, making us feel fuller for longer.
Right.
And preventing those rapid spikes in blood sugar that can really wreak havoc on our metabolism.
So by removing fiber, are these companies actually making us more likely to, like, overeat and develop these chronic diseases? It feels a bit, I don't know, like a rigged game.
It's a complex issue and there's no, simple answer.
Yeah.
But it does raise important questions about, the role of profit motives in shaping our food environment.
Okay.
And how those motives can sometimes conflict with, public health goals.
Right. Okay. So fiber is out and what's in? Well, based on what you said, it seems like sugar is the star ingredient in a lot of these processed foods.
Sugar is indeed ubiquitous in the modern food supply. It's added to everything, from bread and yogurt to sauces and even savory snacks.
Wow.
And, as that junk food, sugar, and additives documentary pointed out, the food industry has invested heavily in creating these, hyper-palatable, sugar-laden foods
Right.
that our brains just find incredibly rewarding.
It's almost like they've cracked the code to our pleasure centers, making it that much harder to resist,
Yeah.
those sugary treats.
That's not far off.
Yeah.
The science of food addiction is fascinating, and it reveals how sugar can actually trigger the same reward pathways in the brain
Oh, wow.
as addictive drugs.
Really?
And the more we consume, these highly rewarding foods, the more our brains become wired to crave them.
That explains why it's so hard to stop at just one cookie. Oh, my gosh.
Right.
But the most shocking part of that documentary, I think, was the revelation about that 1999 meeting of food executives.
Right.
They basically decided to ignore the growing obesity epidemic
Yeah.
because addressing it would be bad for business.
It's a stark reminder that the food industry is, first and foremost, a business.
Right.
And while, many companies are making efforts to offer healthier choices, the bottom line, it often takes precedence.
So what can we do after diving into all this research? It feels a bit overwhelming, like we're up against this giant invisible force.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any hope for reclaiming our health and our food system?
I understand that feeling of being overwhelmed,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't say it's hopeless.
Okay.
Remember all those grassroots movements that we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The beef initiative, farmers markets, chefs like Alice Waters championing a return to real food.
Right.
Those are all signs of positive change.
Mm.
And they all start with, individuals making conscious choices.
So those choices really do matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every time you choose to, cook a meal at home instead of ordering takeout, buy from a local farmer instead of a supermarket chain,
Yeah.
or opt for, a piece of fruit instead of a processed snack, you're sending a message to the market.
Okay.
And those messages, when they're multiplied across millions of people, can start to shift the balance of power.
That's empowering. It's not just about like individual health then, but about like collective action.
Precisely.
I like that.
And speaking of collective action, there's another side to this conversation that we haven't explored yet.
Okay.
The role of technology in shaping the future of food.
Okay, so that's where those articles about food tech and plant-based alternatives come in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could these innovations offer solutions to some of the challenges that we've been discussing?
Right.
Or will they simply create new problems?
That's a good question.
That's what we'll be exploring in part 3 of this deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been through a lot together, haven't we? From shadowy corporate tactics to the science of sugar addiction. And let's be honest, it's been a bit heavy,
Yeah.
but we did promise some hope, right?
Yeah. Mm.
So let's talk about the future of food and how technology might play a role in all this.
That's a great segue because as much as we've, focused on the challenges, there's also a lot of innovation happening in the food space,
Right.
particularly with technology.
Yeah, we've got a stack of articles here about everything from personalized nutrition apps
Yeah.
to lab-grown meat. It's all very sci-fi,
Right.
but also a little bit intimidating.
Yeah.
Is this really the answer to a healthier, more sustainable food system?
Well, I mean, technology is a tool, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
any tool, it can be used for good or for ill,
Right.
depending on who's wielding it and for what purpose.
Right. Of course.
So it's not about technology being, the savior or the villain,
Right.
but about, understanding its potential and its limitations.
Okay, so let's start with some of the promising stuff. Plant-based meats and dairy alternatives.
Yeah.
Gotten a lot of buzz lately.
Mhm.
Beyond burgers, Impossible Burgers, they're even making plant-based cheese and milk now. Is this a step in the right direction?
There's certainly a lot of potential there
Okay.
from an environmental perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Reducing our reliance on animal agriculture could have a significant impact on greenhouse gas emissions,
Right.
land use, water consumption.
Which is huge, considering all the documentaries and reports we've seen about
Yeah.
like the environmental damage caused by industrial farming.
Exactly. And for people who, choose not to eat meat for ethical or religious reasons,
Right.
these alternatives offer more choices
Yeah.
and make it easier to, maintain a plant-based diet.
But are they actually healthy?
Right.
I mean, we've talked a lot about how processed food, even if it's plant-based, can still be, detrimental to our health.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it's important to, be discerning.
Okay.
Not all plant-based alternatives are created equal.
Yeah.
Some are highly processed
Mm-hmm.
and contain ingredients that we might want to limit, like, saturated fat, sodium, artificial additives.
So it's not a free pass to just like load up on veggie burgers and call it a day.
Not quite.
Okay. So plant-based alternatives, check. Promising, but not a silver bullet.
Right.
What else is on the horizon in this food tech revolution?
Well, personalized nutrition is an area that's gaining a lot of traction.
Okay.
It uses technology like genetic testing, microbiome analysis
Mm-hmm.
to create customized dietary recommendations
Yeah.
that are tailored to your specific needs and goals.
It's like having a personal nutritionist in your pocket. That sounds pretty cool, but also maybe a little bit Big Brother-ish.
Right.
Yeah,
There are certainly privacy concerns to be considered,
of course.
and we need to ensure that this kind of data is being used, responsibly and ethically.
Right.
But the potential benefits are intriguing. Imagine being able to optimize your diet for, specific health outcomes,
Right.
like reducing your risk of heart disease or managing your blood sugar levels.
That would be amazing. But it seems like a powerful tool, but also one that could easily like widen the gap between those who can afford these personalized services and those who can't.
That's a that's a crucial point. Access and affordability are, you know, major challenges that
Hmm.
need to be addressed if we want these innovations to benefit everyone.
Right, not just a privileged few.
Exactly.
So we've got plant-based alternatives, we've got personalized nutrition, both with, their pros and their cons.
Hmm.
What other food tech trends should we have on our radar?
Well, there's a lot of buzz around cellular agriculture,
Yeah.
which involves growing meat and other animal products
Hmm.
directly from cells in a lab.
Okay.
It's still in its early stages,
Right.
but proponents argue that it could offer a, more sustainable and
Yeah.
ethical way to produce meat without the environmental impact and animal welfare concerns associated with, traditional farming.
Hmm. Lab-grown meat, that's straight out of a science fiction movie. But I guess if we can grow human organs in a lab, why not meat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like any new technology,
Hmm.
there are uncertainties
Right?
and potential risks that need to be, carefully considered.
Hmm.
Consumer acceptance,
Right.
regulatory hurdles,
Of course.
the potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah.
These are all factors that, need to be addressed.
It sounds like there's a lot to unpack with these emerging food technologies.
Yeah.
But in all this talk about innovation, it's important to remember that technology alone isn't going to fix our broken food system.
You're absolutely right. Technology can be a powerful tool for change,
Mm.
but it's not a substitute for addressing those, systemic issues
Right.
that lie at the root of our food crisis.
Like what kind of things?
Well, the power imbalances, the
Right.
profit-driven motives, the lack of transparency
Mm.
and accountability. Those are all things that need to be addressed in tandem with, technological advancements.
That reminds me of something we talked about earlier about the food industry borrowing tactics from big tobacco to manipulate consumers and downplay health risks.
Right.
And it made me wonder, what if we could use technology to fight back?
That's an intriguing thought,
Yeah.
and it's already happening in some ways. Think
Uh,
about, apps that help you track your food intake and make healthier choices, or social media platforms that
Mm.
connect people with local farmers and food producers.
Or even just using social media to spread awareness about, healthy eating habits and the importance of food policy reform.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Technology can be a powerful tool for, education, advocacy, and community building.
Right.
And when it's used strategically, it can help level the playing field and empower consumers to make, more informed choices.
So it's not all doom and gloom then.
Right.
There's a lot to be concerned about, but also a lot to be excited about
Yeah.
when it comes to the future of food.
I agree. I agree. The key is to be, informed,
Mm-hmm.
to engage critically with these new technologies,
Right.
and to advocate for a food system that prioritizes, both human and planetary health.
And that's the takeaway I hope everyone listening takes to heart. This deep dive has been a journey,
It has.
but it doesn't end here.
Right.
We've given you the tools and the knowledge
Mm.
to navigate this complex food landscape.
Absolutely.
Now it's up to you to use them, make informed choices, support businesses and initiatives that align with your values,
Mhm.
and speak up for a better food future.
Well said. Because ultimately, the power to change the food system lies not just in the hands of, scientists and policymakers,
Right.
but in the hands of each and every one of us.
That's a good point. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters.
Yes.
Until then, stay curious
Stay curious.
and keep exploring.